Welcome to the Heaven on Earth podcast, a world where you study the story you were born into and redesign it into the story you choose. A world where you can have heaven on earth right here, right now, no matter the past. For me, heaven on earth is a holistic experience, leading with the heart, engaging with mind, body, and spirit. It's mindful, fostering calm and secure attachments. As we rise into consciousness, it's an earthly journey where we sensually embrace dynamic living. Welcome to the Heaven on Earth podcast, and I am actually recording during the first week of November, which was election week here in the United States. And the topic today is Scorpio season, and I called it Scorpio season because Scorpio season is a season of death, but it's also the season of rebirth. I'm going to dive pretty deep into this topic today. I hope you watch this all the way through, and at the end, I'm going to give you some steps or some tools, and I'm also going to talk about my Black Friday special, which is coming up. So just hold on all the way to the end because you're going to get some juicy stuff, and I'm hoping to provide some sort of framework for how the energetics feel because it's pretty intense right now. It's energetically intense in the United States, and I'm sure all over the globe as people are expecting to see what comes from the results of these elections. Let's get into it. I'm Claudia Cauterucci, and I'm a DC-based psychotherapist. I've been a psychotherapist for the last 25. I'm also the creator and the architect of something called the Dynamic Re-Evolution Curriculum, and you can find all of that on my website, www.claudiacauterucci.com, because today I just want to focus on the topic at hand rather than telling you about my programs. I also want you to know that my approach for people who are new to this podcast, my approach is multidimensional. This is not a religious podcast. Although I do pull from spirituality, I do pull from traditional scriptures, I do pull from science, I do pull from mythology, I do pull from literature. So I take a topic and I come at it from different angles. That's my approach as a psychotherapist. That's my approach to life. That's who I am in the world, is I like to see something from multiple angles so that I can understand it in a complex way. And because I like to be able to take it in and integrate it from a place of seeing it like a sphere, like a sphere. And I think what's happening today in the now moment, looking at things from a multidimensional angle, feels really important, especially right now. We also don't spiritually or emotionally bypass the things that are hard, even though it sounds like heaven on earth. And I think some people get confused that all we talk about is everything positive or everything beautiful. And I happen to believe, certainly as a psychotherapist and a trauma survivor myself, that we've got to look at the gunk inside ourselves and outside of ourselves, that we really have to understand the shadow. And if you want to know more about the shadow, you can look at my past solo podcast that talks about the shadow as a hidden force, and that if we don't look at our shadow, it will show up. It will show up, and you'll see what this means right now in Scorpio season. All of you know that I read from my notes, and I'm so old school. As you can see, I'm so old school. I actually take scrap paper, I put on music, and I start to write my podcast. The other way that I approach the Heaven on Earth podcast and any topic that I dig deep into is from this concept that I coined called the all is in the small and the small is in the all. What I like to do is I like to connect the individual, the small, to the all, to the collective. And I like to connect the collective, the all, to the individual, the small. And how that the things that happen in the individual actually impact the collective, but also reflects the collective. And that what's happening with the collective is a reflection of what's happening inside the individual. Let's start. Let's start with Scorpio season. And I'm going to be looking over here at my notes. What's so important about Scorpio season, whether you believe in astrology or not, and you'll see everything I talk about, I use metaphor. In session, I use metaphor. Metaphor is so important to how we understand life. Let's start with the story of Oedipus Rex. That's the first one. Let's talk about the Sphinx and Oedipus meeting the Sphinx. And the idea is that the Sphinx is a creature with the head of a woman and the body of a lion, which is similar to Sagittarius, right? The head of a man and the body of a horse. This combination of human and animal. The way that I like to understand that is our organic, intrinsic nature as humans. We have the capacity to reason, to use our logic, to use our intellectual nature, but we also have the impulses of an animal in this way, that sometimes we can respond impulsively without logic or thought. So I like this idea that we are a combination, and that it's in merging that combination that we can find balance in how we are actually responding to life. Oedipus had to approach the Sphinx and solve a riddle. And the riddle had 3 parts. And if you couldn't solve the riddle, you would die. Oedipus solved the riddle, and the riddle was, what is on all 4s in the morning, on 2 feet in the afternoon, and 3 feet in the evening? And the riddle was basically a baby in the morning. These are the 3 stages of the life cycle, or an adult in the afternoon, and then an older person in the evening, right? Because an older person walks with the king. And Oedipus was able to solve that riddle and did not die. So the idea here for me is, how does that translate to who we are as humans, who we are as humanity? In this fable of Oedipus and the Sphinx, the idea was that even though Oedipus was able to solve the riddle and not die, he wasn't able to solve his own internal nature. And that's how he ended up dying in the end. The concept here was that if we do not understand our internal world, it will be, quote, the death of us. So that true wisdom comes from inside of us and not by solving the riddles outside of us. What I'm wanting to emphasize here, and you'll watch my flow, is that the inner understanding, what I call the inner journey, as my group, Wealth from Within, is what leads us to true wisdom and inner peace. That even though we can sometimes solve the riddles of the external world, we have success in the external world. And if you've listened to my podcast, this is always the thread. It doesn't mean that we have inner peace, that our internal life doesn't feel chaotic, which can lead to the death of us, which in psychotherapy we can find through self-medicating, addictions, depressions, anxiety. These are the things that lead to our internal disorder. We have to find meaning in our existence. Even though Oedipus was able to avoid death by solving the external riddle with the Sphinx, he was not able to avoid his own death, his own demise, because he did not solve all the riddles he had inside. What are those riddles? Those riddles are the ways that we are mired in trauma, in our woundedness, in our impulses, right? This animal nature that we've got to respond from our impulses, as opposed to understanding why they're there. Life's greatest challenge, according to psychotherapy, according to a lot of the wisdom traditions, is that it's not by solving the external, but it's about going inside and solving the internal. The quest for self knowledge is the true quest. What is the greatest riddle of our time? And I would say of all of humanity's existence. And that is being at war. Being at war, not only with each other externally, but being at war inside of ourselves. And when we are at war inside of ourselves, we are at war with our partners, with our lovers, in traffic, with our children, with people we don't understand. War is the greatest riddle of humanity. Let's move into number 2, Scorpio. And again, what I'm doing is what I want you to picture is the topic. The topic is of death and rebirth. And I am going to approach it from multiple angles, like spokes on a wheel. We just did Oedipus Rex and the Sphinx, and now we're going to move to another way of looking at it, which is through the eyes of Scorpio, through the eyes of astrology. Scorpio is the sign of death and the understanding that death is inevitable for all humans. And cycles of nature have death. Right now, we're in the middle of autumn. And all that means is that the leaves are falling, that there's going to be a death before winter sets in until spring comes, where there is a rebirth. One of the messages of the sign of Scorpio is that things are urgent through death, but not grim. Do not be afraid of death. It's a call to be present in each moment. This is where mindfulness, where meditation, where understanding what's happening in the moment is so important, and why Scorpio highlights this, the astrology sign of Scorpio, as a metaphor. The other thing that's interesting about the sign of Scorpio is that it's ruled by Pluto. And according to astrology, every sign has a ruling planet. Well, for Scorpio, it's Pluto. And Pluto is the planet of unearthing, of pulling things up, because Scorpio goes pretty deep, of destruction, even, and of death. Pluto removes, cleanses, listen to this, the ashes of the past, because the past must be transmuted in order for us to be reborn. Scorpio is also a sign of deep, profound contemplation. Scorpios seem mysterious, but a lot of it is because they're doing such intense mental and emotional work. They go deep. So a lot of Scorpios are healers, are death doulas. They help us go inside. They help us transition. You're going to see a lot of Scorpios working in hospices because they're great at allowing for the gentleness, the tenderness, and the beauty of death. Scorpio is also the sign of transformation. You're able to witness with great empathy when someone is dying. They're able to witness without judgment someone's transformation. So all that gooey stuff that happens in a chrysalis, all the stuff where we struggle with our darkness and with our shadows, Scorpios are great at putting a circle of witness around us and of watching those sides of ourselves die. And by the way, a Scorpio, this is for you, Scorpios. If you are not accepting parts of your life that are dying, that need to be reborn, you're going against your true nature. And you will experience great suffering. This isn't just for Scorpios, by the way. It's for humans, which is the topic of today. If we resist moments or things or parts of us that have to die in order for something new to be rebirthed, we will suffer greatly. And our call outs, remember when I was talking about the shadow, will become stronger and stronger. Amanda Flaker, who's someone I work with, and we're actually writing the second edition of the Empath Leader book. That's going to come out next year. It's super exciting because Amanda is joining us as an author. But she talks a lot about the importance of witnessing. She's a Scorpio. Witnessing is so powerful. The process of watching someone go deep into their wounds, go deep into their trauma, and start to delayer and shed and watch the ashes, right, fall off of the past, of our traumatized past, and watch the transformation of someone. And that is what she calls witnessing. And so, certainly as a psychotherapist, I do that all week long. I've done it for years, is to non judgmentally to circle someone with love and light and watch how they transform and how they have to sometimes die, most of the times, all of us, to parts of ourselves. Parts of ourselves. And the process of witnessing is actually non judgmentally, by the way, essential that it's non judgmental, is a process of people healing. In order for people to have healing, there has to be a circle of non judgmental love and light so that they can do the work of transformation. Okay? So, check it out. The role of the psychotherapist, the guide, the healer, the mentor is the one that witnesses another individual, right? The small. Now let's move it to the all. Amanda holds, and I agree, that it's the role of the empowered empath to witness the deaths that are happening in human nature, in humanity, to witness the shadow side of humanity, to witness all that gunky shadow, the wounds, the trauma, the icky, the hard, the difficult parts of humanity. It is the role of the empowered empath. And why do I say empowered? Because the empath has the capacity to feel, to deeply feel another's experience. If we're not empowered, if we don't have boundaries, if we cannot hold in our stillness and our non-judgment, if we cannot hold and not be triggered, we cannot do the work of witnessing, of truly witnessing, right? If me as a psychotherapist, if I feel judgmental or highly triggered in session by what someone is saying, I cannot help in the process of their healing because I am not holding them in love and light. The same thing happens to the empath that does not feel empowered. The empath who does not feel empowered will literally leave their bodies to feel for another person, will try to save the other person, as opposed to just allowing the natural cycle of life, the natural cycle of nature, which is this process, Scorpio season, of death and rebirth. Even in the Sphinx's riddle, right? We are born, then we are adults, then we age, and then we die. This happens for processes. We have our children, we raise them, they leave to rebirth a new family, their own existence. And we die to the fact that they are no longer ours. They go out and become who they are meant to be, who they were birthed to be. You're following me, Scorpio season. So the role of the empowered empath is to watch this cycle of death and rebirth for humanity. The role of the psychotherapist, the all is in the small is in the all, is to watch it for the individual human. All right, let's move to number 3, another spoke in the wheel of how we're going to observe this. So one of the things that Scorpio really says, and that spirituality really says, and you're going to see how that comes in. That's one of the spoke in the wheels, is that to live a life well, we must honor death. Some psychologists would say, right, psychoanalytic psychologists for sure, like Freud or Jung, would say that the death of the ego. Some meditation teachers is that the death of the ego. And I believe that we have ego deaths all throughout life. And if you saw my podcast with La Doctora Claudia Campos, a Colombian psychologist and expert sexologist, talked a lot in our podcast together about these grievings. And in Spanish, we call it lutos, these times of witnessing our own deaths, and that life is a series of deaths and rebirths. So Scorpio goes deep. Scorpio goes deep into the root, not just the external. Again, a sub theme that we're talking about here is the external and the internal, and that what's most powerful is the internal work. And Scorpio must go deep and must find the root. Scorpio, the empowered Scorpio, needs to go deep. So again, Scorpios, if you're staying on the surface, if your whole life is about chit-chatting, you are likely avoiding yourself, my loves. You're avoiding yourself because it's not in the Scorpio nature to not go deep and find the root causes. Scorpios love those deep dives, those dark places, those mysterious places. All right, ready for another spoke? Number 3, the Phoenix. And it flows beautifully. It flows beautifully because Scorpio is related to the myth of the Phoenix. The myth of the Phoenix is that it's a bird that resembles the final stage of Scorpio. It's the most evolved version of Scorpio. Why? And it's a mythical bird. So again, we're approaching it from a mythical angle because this bird represents rebirth, renewal, and the triumph of life over death. The triumph of life over death. This bird becomes ashes. It's so funny because in private practice, it's called the Dinamica practice, where I see people clinically, and my logo is a Sphinx. For my Claudia Cauterucci, my logo is a peacock, right? Evolving, becoming the most favorite version of ourselves. But in my private practice, the logo is the Phoenix. Because in psychotherapy, we do these processes of death and rebirths all the time and of deep, profound transformation. And the triumph of life, listen, the triumph of life over death. But in order to have that emergence, that beautiful emergence into that beautiful Phoenix, death must come first. And we need death doulas. We need people who can witness the deaths that we are going through. So let's talk a little bit. What's coming to mind for me is something that you're going to find very odd, but go with me. Sometimes I have different types of meditations, and if you've worked with me or if you're going to work with me, you know that I name different types of meditations. Sometimes I'll call it the end result meditation, all sorts of names, and my clients call them cloudisms. And I have a series on YouTube called Cloudisms where I talk about things in a way that have some slang to them, or I break it down in a way that is easy to digest and understand. But one of my meditations I call, strangely, just play with me here, the death meditation. And the death meditation is about mindfully putting ourselves in a place when we're grieving, when we're struggling with the end of a relationship or through a breakup, where we actually go through deep, profound, like Scorpio, going deep, right? Going through deep, profound awareness and acceptance that something is dying. And we grieve it. So again, we don't spiritually or emotionally bypass anything. Where we are aware, sort of for people who are empty nesters, that their child is gone. And these are death meditations. The other way, though, that I use a death meditation is in order to live life more fully. So this is going to sound strange, but sometimes when I'm hugging my son and he's going out for the night to have friends, I say, oh, if this was the last moment we're together and it's not grim, remember what we talked about, Scorpio? It's not grim. It actually brings a little bit of urgency in the best of ways. Who have I been with him today? Have I said, I love you? Have I laughed with him? Have I tried to listen and understand him? So, in some ways, when we think of death, we actually can jump into life more fully. It's a way of bringing beautiful heaven on earth, mindfulness, the magic of being here in the now. It gives it that glitter. When I talk to my aging parents who are now in their 80s, when I call them, I am so aware of their time here on the planet. And being aware of their time makes me be more present in that conversation, hearing my mom's voice, my dad's voice, receiving them, wanting to talk to them, because I'm aware of death. And so it's a meditation because I am in the present moment. You can be in the present moment. Again, it's not grim. If this is today, which is all we have, right? We only have today. If we only have today with our lovers, our children, our animals, our parents, if we only have today, death and rebirth, we are more present to this magical moment, which is what I call the heaven on earth moments, HOEM, the home moments. Hoem, but it's sounds like home, the home moments. Those are my death meditations, is to mindfully be present to today. If I only have today, what is there? Who have I been? Who have we been to each other? Okay, so moving on. Number 4, let's talk about this season of death and rebirth, Scorpio season, from a Christian perspective, from Christianity, from a traditional religion. And I like to use the concept of Easter weekend. People call it Good Friday. I call it Human Friday, and I'll explain why. And then I call it Silent Saturday in terms of adding the psycho-spiritual approach to Easter weekend. And then Easter Sunday, of course, which is the Sunday of Resurrection. The reason why I call it Human Friday is because on that Friday, Jesus experienced all of humanity's shadow. The worst of the worst of the worst of the worst of humanity, he experienced on that Friday. Torture, abandonment, rejection, public humiliation, othering, the worst of humans. So I call it Human Friday. It's also when he died. He died on the cross, according to Christian scripture. Then there's what I call Silent Saturday. And from a psycho-spiritual perspective, which is how I work, it was a Saturday that he could not be found. It was the Saturday of transformation, of love and light. It's the Saturday that was silent and still. Because in our process, silence and stillness, what I call the SNS, is part of the process of dying. We must go inside. Remember, everything has a thread of the internal journey. Stillness and silence. And then, of course, there's Easter Sunday, which was resurrection. It was the resurrection of Jesus, where he was transformed, transformation. So remember with the Sphinx, remember with Scorpio, when we honor death, we can see the triumph of life, of resurrection. So in the Christian gospel, the story of Jesus holds. He says, I died on the cross to save humanity. Death was necessary. And what I believe that to be, and I think a lot of scholars believe it, is the death of humanity's shadow, the death of humans doing this to other humans, of othering other humans, of torturing, beating, publicly humiliating, saying, you are not like me, because that's what they said to Jesus. You are not like me. You are not like me, and so you deserve to be tortured, humiliated, shamed, and killed. And I believe that Jesus was saying, this is what has to die. The other part in the heaven on earth concept is a lot of Christians focus on that part of Jesus' story is Human Friday. His message was the message of resurrection. And I always say that, I feel that when we pray to Jesus, for those of you who do, for those of us who do, as someone who holds so much spiritual wisdom, and we come to Jesus and say, but I've been humiliated, I've been shamed, I've been abused, I have trauma, I have human trauma dripping off of me, injuring me, eating me from the inside. Jesus, because he went through Human Friday, is able to say, I know, I did too. Is able to say, I get you. I understand you because I went through it, so that when you come to me, I will be able to say, I get you. And the final message was still, and the resurrection exists. So the triumph of life over death exists. Heaven on earth exists. That's what I say, no matter what our past is, no matter if we have trauma. And this is the all is in the small is in the all. Humanity who have a history of intense, profound, traumatic, horrific, terrorizing trauma. And yet we can find a way to have heaven on earth right now, the resurrection. So resurrection, renaissance. And what does renaissance mean? It means rebirth in French. Transformation. So let's keep moving. Another spoke on the wheel is number 5. Science. Let's go with physics. I know there's a lot of physics lovers who watch me. And the laws of thermodynamics. And I know that sounds really heady, but I'm going to break it down because that's what I know how to do best. So the first law of thermodynamics is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. And we get that. Energy can get very dense and form into matter, or get very light and form into air. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's available to us at all times in different forms. The second law of thermodynamics, I know, just go with me here because we're going with the metaphor of death and rebirth, is that in order for a spontaneous process to occur, the entropy of the universe increases. So I was thinking about that. I was like, all right, let me explore entropy more. And listen to this. Entropy is the degree of disorder or uncertainty in a system. Now, slowly I am leading you somewhere, and where I am leading you is to today, as to what's happening in our world today. But let's backtrack. That was a bit of a spoiler alert. The general trend is that the universe, when it comes to entropy, is moving towards disorder, that it's moving towards death and disorder. And that's the second law of thermodynamics. So basically, entropy is like this life force that makes life more complicated, more chaotic, more messy. We know this. Sometimes the process of death can be messy. Get this. Listen to this. It's so gorgeous. It's so amazing. Okay. Entropy, disorder, death, messiness, increases or stays the same because it's feeding on negative energy. So as I'm studying this, something else shows up. Listen to this. There's something called Schrodinger's paradox. I'm going slowly because I want you to get this. So the second law is that entropy, which is the natural way that the universe increases in death and disorder, keeps going through feeding on negative energy. Schrodinger, who was a Pulitzer Prize winner in 1933, says that the second law isn't wrong. It's right, but it only applies to a closed system. That makes perfect sense because in a closed system, heat cannot come in or leave. So what happens in a closed system? Heat cannot come in or leave, and therefore it ends up, it's like sort of a dog eating its tail, a snake eating its tail. It feeds off of the negative energy that keeps happening inside of it. So it makes sense that there's death and disorder in a closed system because it has nowhere to go. And then Schrodinger goes to say that living systems are open systems. Closed systems are isolated. You know what that made me think of? It made me think of cults and families where there's a narcissistic parent or systems where there's a narcissistic leader. One of the tactics is to close the family. No one gets to come in or out. Right? So there's no entrance or exit. And within a system that is headed by a narcissistic system, the all is in the small is in the all. Let's say a parent, a narcissistic parent in a family, or a narcissistic leader in a country, whatever it is, what begins to happen is that type of leader, parent, cult leader, isolates the group. So many cult leaders go somewhere else, isolates the group, doesn't allow other family members to come in and out. And so the system begins to feed on themselves. The second law of thermodynamics. No one can come in and out. It feeds off of negative energy. And therefore, there is death and disorder. There is death and disorder, but living systems are open systems. Can you sort of start seeing where I'm going? When an organism can exchange heat, according to Schrodinger, entropy or disorder decreases. And his question is, how does an organism avoid decay? What he found is, of course, all organisms, right? All living beings, plants included, the way that we avoid decay, my loves, this is important for you who are listening. is, of course, externally, we eat, we drink, we breathe, we assimilate. Plants do that. Plants have to breathe, plants have to get watered, plants have to eat nutrients, and plants assimilate to their environment. That's what we do, all in the small, small in the all, as humans. We assimilate. But all of that is external. What physicists have found is that the most important factor in an organism, a system, a human, not decaying, not having disorder, is through their internal DNA. And DNA being the algorithm that basically gives instructions to that organism. And this is the way that order can be maintained within. So the emphasis here is that even if someone, let's go to the small again. Let's go back to the individual. Even if you're exercising and eating well and taking your supplements, if you are not doing the internal work, if you are not confronting your shadow, you'll be unbalanced. Healing will be more difficult. Disorder will rule your days. So we must have this beautiful dance to be a living, healing, healthy organism between the internal and the external. Now again, these goes for all organisms. And in order for that to happen, what is dying within us has to go out. Psychotherapy, spirituality 101 has to go out. Again, Scorpio season, the season of death and rebirth. It begs the question, what is humanity's algorithm? What is the algorithm that we, right? If DNA is the algorithm inside of an organism, what is our algorithm? Is your algorithm negative self-talk? Is your algorithm that you live by the wounds of the past without transmuting them? What is the algorithm inside of you that is dominating your life? And what is the algorithm that humanity is living by? What is humanity's algorithm? And I want to say that it's war. And again, my friend and my colleague and Van de Flaker talks about this. War is a closed system, and war has been around since the beginning of time. If we want to go biblical, Abel and Cain, two brothers killed each other because they said, "You're not like me, because I need to beat you. I need to compete with you. I need to feel superior to you." And that creates war. People can't come on go, remember, when dominated by that algorithm, because it feeds off of negative energy. That's what makes that algorithm go. And I want you to notice that externally, that is the algorithm that gets fed to us. Fear, shaming, othering. And it keeps the war algorithm, not only the self-war algorithm, because if I feel ashamed, if I feel like I'm going to get publicly shamed, if I feel that I'm inferior and made to feel like I'm inferior, I will be at war with myself, and therefore I will be at war with others. And that is the dominant algorithm in humanity. From my therapist chair all the way out there. And we see it every single day. Increasing order inside of ourselves by going inside is possible. By doing that, get this, we can change the algorithm. Now, why do you think I have this podcast? Because I'm attempting to change the algorithm. And according to the algorithm, which means that death and rebirth exist, the honoring of the death of my shadow, of befriending my shadow, of dying to ways that I was that create more war allows for the algorithm outside of me to be different. So let's recap, right? Scorpio season, the Sphinx, the riddle with Oedipus Rex, thermodynamics, Christian resurrection, Jesus' resurrection, death, rebirth, resurrection, transformation, the honoring of death, the Sphinx, getting rid, making ashes of things that are decaying. If we want to, we could talk about the tarot, the tower card, the collapsing systems that are decaying need to collapse in order for the birth of new. And so part of me keeping the beat to this idea of heaven on earth, of mindfulness, of healing, and a lot of the planet is doing this work, by the way, a lot of the planet in an attempt to change the dominant algorithm that humanity has going, which is to be at war with ourselves and with each other. And what happens there? We go extinct. We die. Childbirth is messy, but it goes through those stages, right? The child is inside of us. Then by the 8th or 9th month, we start feeling these pains. It requires that the child leave our bodies as women. And that is a messy process. It's messy, it's painful, it's difficult. Check it out. What do we need in order for that birth to happen? And we're calling sort of the leaving of the symbiotic union, because when the fetus is inside the mother, there's a symbiosis. There's a complete connectedness. So there's a death that happens as the child gets born into their own little being. There's a separation, there's a death. And that process is painful, it's difficult, it feels disorderly, it feels chaotic. What do we need? What do we need in that process? We need a good midwife or a good doctor, someone to guide us through that. We need support, family members, our lovers, our co-parent to be there with us, support. And this is tools for us as humans. We need breathing that calms the central nervous system, that helps us find all the fire inside of ourselves to go through this process of birth, to pushing out something new, because the old is dying, the symbiotic union is dying. We need oxytocin, because once the baby is born, baby is put on our chest, which releases the hormone of oxytocin, which is the trust and tenderness hormone. We need tenderness. We need trust. We need embodiment, using the body, rocking back and forth, putting your body in water, getting on the knees. We need embodiment for the process of this painful birth. We need embodiment when we move trauma through us. We need breathing. We need others. We need guides. We need healers. We need the same exact thing in this process that humanity needs in the process of watching systems die in order for there to be a rebirth. We need stillness. There's this part of going through labor where the woman has to go inside. Really, you can't possibly, through this incredible movement, focus on the outside. Again, the internal journey. The woman has to go inside and gather all of her fiery, ferocious strength to push out life. Remember, we honor death in order to see the triumph of life. The SNS, stillness, and silence. So, approaching the end, but I want you to see all the threading here. Scorpio season. Here are some tools for you for this moment in time. for November 2024. Everything that you need through a death and rebirth, we need right now. In order to change the algorithm of war, we need to get very silent and still. We need to have whatever feelings we are having on the inside. We need to have an open system. We are an organism with an open system. Remember, if we close our system, we feed on negativity, according to the second law of thermodynamics. The reason why Jesus was tortured, shamed, abused was because he was working in a closed system that didn't want anything new. And he was new, and he brought a new message. We have to make sure that we're keeping our exits and our entrances open, that we are seeing all that triggers us from the outside and we're taking it inside and we're transmuting in order to have a transformative experience, in order to come to this planet Earth and where it is right now in a new way and to set a new algorithm. My invitation is that the new algorithm be heaven on earth. And what does heaven on earth mean? According to this podcast, it means that we look at the shadow, that we look at darkness, that we confront the bully inside and the bully outside. We transmute in order to transform. But what is required in everything that I've talked about is the inner journey. Don't just be external. Like Oedipus Rex, he figured out the external riddle, but he did not figure out his internal riddles, and he ended up in demise. If humanity does not figure out the internal riddles, does not figure out that we've become a closed system, we will feed on negativity and we will go extinct. We will die in that way. Because the dominant algorithm is the algorithm of war, self-war and war with others. We can't do this alone. We need support, we need communion, we need gathering, we need conversation within an open system. Which doesn't mean, by the way, remember, no emotionally bypassing, that we're not triggered. And right now is a period of time that is the inflammation. I mean, all you need to do right now is light a match. Because why? Because what's happening on planet Earth is bringing up the trauma of war, my loves. Centuries and centuries of war based on othering humans, based on being at war with ourselves and others, and that creates trauma. All of my podcast episodes talks about this. And I keep beating the drum because in order to have a new algorithm, we've got to repeat this. We've got to beat the drum to a new algorithm. So, yes, all of us, this is all based on free will. It's a gift to us that we have free will. So we can resist going inside. We can avoid ourselves. We can self-medicate. We can drink, smoke. We can do whatever we want. We can fight. We can stay with the war vibe. Everything is free will. All I'm doing is inviting us to think of a new way of being. And in order for that to do that, we need the SNS. We need silence and stillness. Remember the 3Ds, the data? We gather the data, we discern, and then we decide the action. Doesn't mean we don't move into action, my loves. We move into action. But after stillness and silence, I heard somewhere, are we the lighthouse or the storm? Are we the lighthouse or the storm? And in one of my cloudisms and my group, tells me about this. I talk about light housing, meaning the tsunami waves are going. Right now, they're going. And in order for us is to come back to center, to stillness and silence, to silent Saturday when we go by Christian Gospels, to go inside for there to be transformation. And I know there's a lot of distracting energies out there, and they're all based on fear and war. So right now, my loves, the dominant algorithm is on full blast. Full blast. So what if there's a group of us that says, I'm going to get very quiet right now, and I'm going to explore my inner riddles, which really means my triggers, my wounds. I'm going to clean up on that because I find that the most radical thing we can do right now is to heal. Heal from the trauma of war between humans. That is the most radical piece of activism that we can do right now, is for the planet to encourage healing. Claim your inner order. Claim your inner peace. Claim your inner knowing. Claim it. It is yours. It is all yours as a human. And once you have that, it radically resonates out. It resonates out. And the algorithm of war is not expecting this. It's not expecting it. And if there's enough of us who are amassing with a new algorithm for humanity and for human beings, little by little, will begin to pull onto us through healing, through the transmutation of trauma based on war. Even if you're like, but I've never been in war. No, but maybe you had a father who was always warlike in the home. Maybe you had neighbors. Maybe you grew up in a religion that was based in war, or being attacked or attacking. Maybe you grew up in an area where you got bullied. That's all war. So your commitment to healing yourself, to finding your inner peace, your inner knowing, to finding your own riddles, changes the algorithm. And it certainly changes the algorithm for your future, for the lineage that is coming after you, for the world that we are trying to birth. It certainly changes that. So let's finish with this. Are you the lighthouse or are you the storm? Are you the lighthouse or are you the storm? Thank you, Scorpio season. Go to my website. I'm going to be talking on my Instagram about my Black Friday special. So check it out there.